Any sexual tension between you and Travolta when you were making that film?
Extreme sexual tension.
Really?
Debra Winger was once considered one of Hollywood's brightest stars in the 1980s. She could captivate audiences with just a look or a single line delivered from the heart. In just 3 years, she earned 2 Oscar nominations for her performances in An Officer and a Gentleman and Terms of Endearment. Critics compared her to legendary actresses like Jane Fonda and Meryl Streep, and she became the favorite choice of major directors from Hollywood to Europe. But then something strange happened. Just over 10 years later, she nearly disappeared from the film industry. There was no major scandal, no public breakdown, and no terrible movie that destroyed her career. Instead, there was just one unspoken truth that spread through Hollywood. Nobody wanted to work with Debra Winger anymore. People called her difficult, arrogant, and impossible to manage. For years, she stayed quiet about it all. She didn't try to defend herself in interviews or make compromises to fix her image. The real story behind Debra Winger's career is much more complex than the simple label of difficult actress. Behind every criticism was a deeper story, and behind every moment she fought back was usually an insult or mistreatment that would have hurt anyone. This is not just the story of a rebellious actress, but of a woman who dared to say no in an industry that only rewarded those who always said yes. Her first major relationship in Hollywood began with Urban Cowboy in 1980, which put her on the map as a serious actress. Her co-star was John Travolta, who was riding high from his success in Saturday Night Fever. From their very first meeting, Winger sensed something was wrong. Instead of greeting her normally, Travolta asked if she was Jewish, then immediately asked if she had gone to college. These might have seemed like innocent questions, but to Winger they felt judgmental and prejudiced, as if he was evaluating her based on her appearance and background. He then made a crude sexual comment that she has never repeated publicly. Despite this rocky start, something sparked between them both on and off screen. They began a real relationship that was passionate but also toxic. During one love scene, Travolta was supposed to fake slapping her character, but when the cameras rolled, he actually hit her so hard that he broke one of her teeth. There was no apology, no pause to check if she was okay, just pain, both physical and emotional. Strangely, after that incident, Travolta proposed to her. Winger refused without any long explanation or dramatic scene. She simply said no, instinctively realizing that the relationship had crossed from passion into something controlling and dangerous. She walked away from him and that twisted romance, but the damage from that first major Hollywood relationship would follow her throughout her career. Her experience making An Officer and a Gentleman brought both her greatest artistic achievement and some of her worst treatment in Hollywood. She received an Oscar nomination, and critics praised her emotional depth. But she later said she didn't love making the movie, and certainly didn't love it afterward. Her co-star Richard Gere, who audiences saw as charming and soulful, was to Winger nothing more than a brick wall. This wasn't meant as a joke. For years, this phrase symbolized the complete lack of connection between two people who had to play an iconic romantic couple on screen but couldn't connect at all when the cameras stopped rolling. Louis Gossett Jr., who played the drill sergeant, later confirmed in his memoir that Winger and Gere avoided each other completely when they weren't filming. They had no conversations, no interaction, not even the slightest warmth between them. Gere never denied this tension, admitting in interviews that there were problems between them but never explaining why. Winger was more honest about it, confessing that her own insecurities about acting made her irritable, and she often took it out on her co-stars, especially Gere. But the real problems came from behind the camera. Director Taylor Hackford and producer Don Simpson treated her like she was damaged goods. Simpson, who was known for making crude comments about women, once said outright that Winger wasn't attractive enough to be the lead actress. This was an unforgivable insult, even by 1980 Hollywood standards. The mistreatment didn't stop there. Winger was asked to take water pills on certain days because the filmmakers thought her face looked puffy on screen. These weren't medical recommendations from doctors, but demands from men in the editing room who felt they had the right to control a woman's body like she was just another movie prop. Winger was furious, but didn't back down. When she objected to a particular scene that she believed betrayed her character's integrity, the entire production had to stop. Director Hackford was angry about the delay, but later, after looking at the footage again, he had to admit that Winger was absolutely right from an acting perspective. The problem was that in Hollywood, being right doesn't guarantee forgiveness, especially if you're a woman. When male actors halt production because they're unsatisfied with something, they're called perfectionists. When Winger did the same thing, she was labeled difficult and uncontrollable. The treatment she received from Taylor Hackford and Don Simpson went beyond simple professional disagreements. On the set, Winger wasn't just an actress proving her skills. She was a young woman trying to navigate a system controlled by men who made no attempt to hide their desire to dominate everything, including her body. She once described Hackford as an animal, which wasn't meant as an insult, but as the instinctive response of someone who had been pushed too far, too many times. Simpson's behavior was particularly cruel. After each day of filming, he would review the footage and decide that her face looked puffy. Then he would demand that she take medication to look thinner, with no consultation with a doctor and no consideration for her comfort or health. If she didn't look beautiful enough on screen according to his standards, she had to take drugs. When Winger pushed back against this treatment and refused to shoot a scene she felt misrepresented her character, the production was delayed. Hackford was furious, but later admitted she was right, not just emotionally, but in terms of the character's psychology and the story structure. However, this admission came with no apology, only a quiet warning that she wasn't someone who could be easily controlled. In Hollywood, nothing is more threatening than a woman who can't be controlled. In the early 1990s, Winger was cast in the lead role of A League of Their Own, a story about women baseball players during World War II. She believed deeply in this project and trained with the Chicago Cubs for 3 months, building her physical endurance and learning baseball techniques to authentically portray an athlete. For her, this wasn't just another role, but a serious commitment to history, to women, and to her craft as an actress. Then Madonna was cast in the film. When Winger learned that the pop star would be joining the cast, she didn't get angry or call the director to complain. She simply walked away, decisively and without explanation. Later, she told the press that she felt the film had changed direction from a historical story to something more like a showcase for music and entertainment that would drown out the original spirit. When asked about Madonna's acting abilities, Winger delivered a single cutting line. "I think Madonna's film career speaks for itself." There was no drama or bitterness, just the sigh of someone who no longer had patience for artistic compromise. She walked away because she knew that when your heart no longer believes in a project, it no longer deserves your talent or integrity. Perhaps the most intense relationship of Winger's career was with Shirley MacLaine during the filming of Terms of Endearment in 1983. They played mother and daughter in this masterpiece that won the Oscar for Best Picture and earned both actresses nominations for Best Actress. But while the film told a tender story of maternal love, the set was a quiet battleground where two strong-willed women clashed in every scene. When they first met, MacLaine, already a legend with 3 Oscar nominations, arrived in an elegant fur coat and dress with the polished aura of old Hollywood. Winger showed up in combat boots, a short skirt, and a defiant attitude. MacLaine later admitted in her memoir that when she saw Winger, she thought, "Oh my God," not as a judgment, but as the instinctive alarm of someone from a completely different generation. The tension reached its peak when Winger yelled at MacLaine during a take for missing her mark on the set. MacLaine snapped back that she knew what hitting a mark meant. That's when Winger walked off, lifted her skirt slightly, looked over her shoulder and "Oh, you shield," Roke whined in Shirley MacLaine's face. MacLaine recounted this moment in her memoir, and Winger never denied it. When asked about it on a 2018 talk show, she gave a faint smile and said there was something true in that story. They didn't hate each other like enemies, but they challenged each other like wild animals trapped in the same cage where only one could emerge intact. When MacLaine won the Oscar, she delivered the now famous line, "I deserve this," on stage. It wasn't aimed directly at Winger, but everyone in the room knew who stood in its shadow. Winger later said they didn't have lunch together, but there was respect between them. The kind of respect shared between boxers after a brutal fight. By the late 1980s, Winger had worked with many different types of co-stars, but in 1990 on The Sheltering Sky, she encountered John Malkovich, whom she bluntly described as a runway model. This wasn't because he was handsome, but because, in her words, he looked like he was performing himself rather than the character. For Winger, who believed in raw, honest acting and spontaneous emotion, Malkovich's cold, abstract style was completely wrong. In every scene, she didn't see a scene partner but a beautiful display without a soul. When asked what it was like working with Malkovich, she didn't hesitate. He was like a runway model. He moved beautifully. His face was beautiful. But I had no idea who I was talking to. Some said this was jealousy. But to those who had worked with her, it wasn't surprising. She couldn't stand pretense or performances aimed at impressing the audience instead of finding the truth of a character. Throughout 2 decades in Hollywood, Debra Winger had talent, fame, and charisma. She had iconic roles, Oscar nominations, and an audience that loved her raw honesty. But she also had something Hollywood rarely tolerated in a woman: ego, intelligence, and an unwillingness to comply with demands she thought were wrong. For men, these qualities are labeled independence and artistic vision. For Winger, they became difficult, unworkable, and dangerous. Director James Bridges once admitted that he had been so angry with Winger that he stopped production when she refused to shoot a scene. But later, upon review, he had to confess she was completely right. Winger didn't rebel to cause trouble. She simply refused to stay silent when the truth was being distorted, when a character was being falsified, or when an actress was being turned into a puppet for male control. She once said, "If a male actor did what I did, they'd call him a perfectionist. But me? I was trouble." In 1995, standing in an open field in Ireland beside her husband, she said a simple sentence: "I'm done." There were no regrets, no drama, no press conference to announce her retirement. She simply stepped away, realizing that the roles being offered were just tired copies of what she'd already done. There were no more challenges, no more honest dialogue, and no reason left to keep enduring the treatment she had received. She chose to leave, to be a mother and wife, to choose small stages over red carpets, and to live artfully instead of living only for art. Debra Winger wasn't Hollywood's bad girl. She didn't destroy sets, battle addiction, or manipulate the press. She just didn't know how to bow her head and never learned how to do it. Maybe that's why Hollywood, a place that prefers obedient women, never knew what to do with her. And maybe that's also why she's never been forgotten. She didn't disappear because she failed. She walked away while still at the top, when she still had choices and could still say no. In Hollywood's eyes, that act of choosing was the one thing it could never forgive. Chattels, control sonnet as to 4.